You're listening to Family Business with Daphne, and I'm so excited today because I have joining me someone who's pretty much synonymous with Idaho business. I mean, if you hear Idaho business, you hear this guy's name. And I'm going to give you fun facts really quickly, and I bet you're going to say, oh, obviously. Okay, so I'm a busy mom of 4. And what are we all doing at about, 3 p.m., 4? We're probably pulling up to something called, think of the Golden Arches. Think. Of course, joining me in the studios, I have Bill Kyle, family business owner. I'm going to say extraordinaire. Is that okay?
I have been called a lot of things before, but never that.
I hereby dub you family business extraordinaire. And of course, with wife Donna Kyle, his family owns several McDonald's franchises. So we're going to explore that. I'm going to stop yapping because I have so many questions. I want to learn about this. When you talk to people about family business ownership, they're like, no, you can't do that. You're going to kill each other. You certainly can't work with your husband or a wife, and you can't work with your children, and all of these no's. Well, I have a live and living model here with me today, and he's going to talk to us about it, and I'm sure he's going to be real about it all, and hopefully we can get inspired, encouraged, but more importantly, we can figure out for ourselves how we might do that in our own business. So welcome.
Thank you, Daphne.
Thanks so much for joining us. What would you say, I know this is going to sound like a silly question, but it's important. What would you say your business is? What are you in the business of doing?
We're in the people business, really,
Yeah.
and we happen to sell a lot of food in that process.
Yes.
We have approximately, it depends upon the time of year, of course. Summer is our busiest time of the month, or time of the year, I guess, as you might imagine. Winter being not so busy, but we'll range from anywhere from about 430 to 500 employees at this point in time in our organization. And, of course, that's both full and part-time.
Amazing. You chose a brand that is extremely known. If you ever say franchise, it's synonymous with McDonald's. Did you explore other franchise opportunities prior to that? How did you arrive and decide, I want to make this my franchise opportunity?
Well, that could be a story that would take many hours to really tell in its entirety. But just a thumbnail sketch, Daphne, is I worked for a company in sales for about 9.5 years before I decided to get into the McDonald's business. And quite frankly, at that point in time, I started out with this company and went through several levels of sales and eventually management with them. And back in those days, and this was probably long before you were born, there was an era there where companies could retire executives, managers, without any issues relative to age discrimination or that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And I found that I was replacing a lot of folks in the 45 to 50 age range, and they only made the mistake of turning older. And I just determined that was never going to happen to me because as I happened to be the lucky person, I guess, on the way up at that point in time, I had a lot of those individuals that eventually came to work for me or continued to work for me, under me, and they were still very capable people. And I just recognized that was something that I just didn't want to ever happen to me. I was born and raised in a farm environment, and I think that breeds a little bit more of an independent spirit.
Yes.
And so at that point in time, I began searching for a business of my own. And I looked at a number of different possibilities, but I have to confess that relative to franchising, McDonald's is the only franchised organization that I looked at. And the more I looked and the deeper I got, the more excited I became about the possibilities.
Okay, and hold that thought for 1 second because I want to take a brief step back. What is a franchise?
Well, you buy the right to use an existing system. I am, under the McDonald's franchise system, I am required to abide by their menu. In other words, I cannot simply put on something on the menu that I think might be a good seller in my particular market. I do not have that latitude. Now, that's a little different than a totally independent small business person.
So you couldn't sell
hot dogs,
donuts,
for example.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can't pitch that today.
That's correct.
Okay.
You could pitch it, but I couldn't sell it.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But the fact of the matter is there are certain things, rules and regs that within a franchise that you must conform to the parent organization as to what is, quote, an approved product versus an unapproved product. Now, have I ever sold unapproved products? Yeah. But not often, and only for short periods of time. And I must confess that was probably in the earlier days when things weren't quite as rigidly controlled as they are today.
Is that confining? If you are an entrepreneur, and by definition you're creative and you're always innovating, now you have to fall under this system. Is there conflict there?
There is a conflict, and I have to admit that. But, you have to certainly weigh the pros and the cons, quite frankly. And hopefully the pros certainly outweigh the cons. And I can tell you that some of the items that we had put on our menu way back in the early days that weren't exactly an authorized product per se, although we were using authorized McDonald's approved raw product to make these particular sandwiches. Some of those eventually became an approved product and are system wide. Now, it's not just that I had the idea, but it was one of these things where if an owner operator has an idea about a particular sandwich or product, they can take it to the systems to be, the McDonald's system, if you will, and they will go ahead and run tests and quite frankly, if it proves out to be positive or something that the consumer is responding to, they will go ahead and run with it.
So that's your opportunity to be creative then.
Yes,
you can still
absolutely.
innovate.
For example, Big Mac was such a product. It was
Really?
created by an owner-operator in the East. I believe it was Philadelphia, as I recall correctly. I can tell you that the Egg McMuffin was a product that was developed by an owner-operator in Santa Barbara, California, in the early 70s, actually late 60s, early 70s. He had it in his stores only in Santa Barbara, and he innovated this product. And, of course, now it's the largest selling breakfast sandwich, period.
Oh, I didn't know that it was period. That's amazing.
It is. It's huge.
So does he get a cut for that?
Nope. That's just part of the system.
Really?
That's
Interesting.
Right. He gets lots of accolades and pats on the back, but not a lot of cash in the pocket.
There's a plaque somewhere with that.
That's correct.
There you go.
You got
it. Okay.
Yeah, his name was Herb Peterson that developed the Egg McMuffin. And strange as it may sound, I ate those quite frequently when I was in Santa Barbara because I lived in that general area for some time, and I would visit there. I had a salesperson that worked for me there, and when I'd go in there, and I discovered these things at McDonald's long before I even knew I was interested in McDonald's.
Yeah. And so did that weigh in your decision then to go with franchising versus?
No, it really did not. It was just one of those situations where you looked at the business cases for those kinds of businesses that I was looking at the time, and like I said, the deeper I looked into McDonald's, the more excited I got about the possibilities, and I just decided that's where I was going to go. And so I put in my application for a franchise and went through all the various background checks and financial checks and all that sort of thing that they do prior to issuing a franchise, and fortunately passed all of their hurdles. Some with not a lot of room to spare, but nonetheless, they decided to take a flyer on me, and so I was offered. Well, first of all, you go onto a waiting list, basically, because back in those days, it was very difficult to get into McDonald's. Even then, it's even tougher now. But back then, there was a waiting list for new stores, and they were giving them at that time to existing franchisees, particularly if they were in close proximity to one of their other stores. And so you go on this waiting list, and they did guarantee me that I would well, I shouldn't say guarantee. They did tell me that I would probably have a store within 5 years from the time I signed on the list. And they said it's possible maybe as soon as 2 years, but at any rate, that was the thing at that time, and I agreed to that.
Okay.
And
but I have to ask your wife in this process, what were her thoughts, and how was that conversation?
Well, I'm very, very fortunate. I married my childhood sweetheart,
Aww.
if you will. She and I went to rival high schools together, if you will. And Donna has been extremely supportive of this venture right from the start. And quite frankly, no matter which way I'd have chosen to go, she'd been behind me 110%. That's just Donna. She was Donna's a teacher by profession and was teaching school at the time in the LA City school systems. Both she and I were born and raised in southern Manitoba, Canada, and immigrated to the U.S. a very long time ago. And, of course, Donna actually has dual citizenship. Her father was first a Texan, then an American, I think, is the way it worked. And so she actually had dual citizenship, and so it was no big deal for her. But, I immigrated to the U.S. in 1963. And then Donna and I married in 64. So this past fall, we celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary. So
did you say 50?
50, that's right. And you know what? She's still super supportive. You know, she's been a great partner this whole time. Anything that I've chosen to do, she's always got behind and supported me in my endeavors in any way she possibly could. And that's one of the reasons why it's worked, quite frankly.
Amazing. So do you have... What you said is amazing. I don't even know where to start with that. But 50 years, you're in business together for, she's behind the scenes with you. But how are you doing this? Are you doing date nights? Are you doing weekly conversations? Are you fighting outside of McDonald's and leaving everything at home and nothing? How does this work?
It was very difficult in the early years, I must confess. Once we got through the process and chose Twin Falls as our place to open our business, we came here prior to the store being built, actually. We came in the fall of 72, and the store location had already been selected, but nothing had yet been done. Once we got the store open on the 4th of January of 1973, this is the one on Blue Lakes and Hayburn here in Twin Falls, it was very, very long days, no days off for, I won't say weeks or months. In some cases, it was years. It's just one of those things where when you open up a new business, you've got to put in the time necessary to make it work. And quite frankly, when we opened the business, it opened much slower than what McDonald's had anticipated. McDonald's had a pretty good track record of projecting sales, but in this particular market, they didn't just miss the bullseye, they missed the whole target. And so it was one of those situations where sales weren't what they were expected to be, and so I had to put in the necessary time to try to build and develop that business. Quite honestly, as with most small businesses, I went in undercapitalized. I didn't realize how undercapitalized I was until it got into the business for a few months.
And by undercapitalized, you mean not having enough money to do the day-to-day operations and future investments? Yeah,
I had enough money to get into the day-to-day business, but as we got into the business, as I say, the business was reacting much slower than what we had anticipated, and therefore I was not making anything. I was, in fact, losing substantial amounts of money every month. And so I didn't have a very deep well, in other words. I didn't have a lot of reserves. And so I couldn't.
It must have been stressful on the marriage.
It was extremely, it really wasn't stressful on the marriage, again, and I owe that to Donna. It was very difficult in that I couldn't afford to pay another couple of managers to open or close the store. So guess what? I did both.
Doing it.
So, my average day was 12, 15 hours a day. And many days it was more than 15. I can't remember. I can recall in the early days, it was years before I took a day off. It just, there was no day off per week or whatever. It was 7 days a week, and you did what you had to do to survive.
And did you already have your boys at that point?
Well, Darren, my oldest, was 2 when we moved here. And so Donna was expecting Kristen, our daughter, and she was born that first spring that we were here. She was born in the spring of 73. and then Ryan came along about 4 years later. But it was just long, hard days and weeks and months just to get a footing and get the business off the ground, so to speak. And it was working. We were building the business. It was growing slowly but surely, and it continued to evolve. And again, it's just one of those things where that's what you have to plan to do, or be willing to do if you open a business on your own. Just because it's a franchise doesn't mean to say it's a guarantee.
Yes.
Okay. It's an independent business, just like Mary's Dress Shop down the street. The only difference is I've purchased the right to use a very specified and specific menu and system of doing business, i.e., the way that the product is cooked and put together and things of that nature.
So would you recommend this to young families? Would you recommend franchising, period?
I would hope, yes, I would, Daphne. It's one of those situations where, as tough as it was for me in the beginnings, it's evolved. And again, when I got into this business, you got to remember that McDonald's Corporation, as it's known today, only came into existence April 15th of 1955. Okay, and I opened this business, the first one here in Twin Falls, in January of 73. So McDonald's was still a fairly new entity at that point in time, not well known like it is today. And so there were a lot of different kinds of hurdles that I had to jump that a new person going into this type of business today would not necessarily have to do. And so I would say, not that I'm trying to say that it's easier today, but it's different, very different.
Yes,
okay, because the brand is so popular and so well known. It's just a whole lot better or easier to do than it was back then.
The second thing you mentioned, I just wrote for Entrepreneur Magazine a story on family business and immigrant families, and you said you were an immigrant.
I'm one of those.
That's amazing. What are your thoughts about family business and franchising for immigrant families?
Well, franchising is a very broad brush. There's a lot of different kinds of franchises out there. I don't pretend to know about a lot of the other ones. I'm sure that for the right person, there's a lot of different franchises that would work for different people, immigrants or non-immigrants.
Do you think there's a benefit, though, to having a system laid out as opposed to trying to figure out a new culture, now doing business in that new culture?
Yes, I think that having a tried and true operational plan is certainly a benefit to having or to buying a franchise. Now, again, all franchises are not the same. And McDonald's is probably one of the more different ones in that, for example, there is not one solitary thing in my restaurant that I purchased from McDonald's Corporation, which blows most people away.
That is interesting.
I didn't know that. Well, McDonald's is not in the business of supply. They're in the franchising business. And that's very different than a lot of my major competitors. And the bigger names, they have their own commissaries, and you're required to buy from them. And the company takes a good markup on their distribution system and things of that nature. Ray Kroc, that started McDonald's back in, like I said, when he opened up his first store, April 15th of 55. His philosophy was that he did not want the system to make money off of the franchisees by supplying them. His philosophy was that he would make his money through sales, through the sale of product, and he takes a percentage. The corporation, McDonald's Corporation, takes a percentage of our sales as a service fee, and then there's a rent factor, and McDonald's, that's how they make their money. They're in the real estate business, and they put guys like Donna and I in the hamburger business, if you will.
Yes.
And McDonald's is one of the largest landowners in the U.S.
Yes.
Okay. And what they do, the franchise system that McDonald's has, they will go in and typically, wherever possible, they purchase the ground, then they put up the shell of the building and do some of the site improvements like sidewalks, curbs and gutters, parking lot, that sort of thing. Then they turn around and lease it to folks like me. And I am then responsible for everything from the landscaping to the signage that goes on the building to the big sign out on the front street to all of the equipment within the four walls of the restaurant, literally from the tile on the floor to the tile on the ceiling and everything in between. That's the franchisee's cost and expense. But
franchisee meaning you,
meaning me,
having
that's
the
right.
to license.
That's correct. Mm-hmm. And what we are, the structure is that we will pay McDonald's a minimum amount of rent for that particular facility, or a percentage of sales, whichever is greater, on any given month.
Oh,
and
now that is interesting.
Well,
that's very flexible.
That's how they make their funds. All of the product, as I said, that I purchase is not purchased from McDonald's, but purchased from independent suppliers. But, and I say but, everything is manufactured to McDonald's specifications by these independent suppliers and wholesalers. The meat has very specific formulation, and there are different meat companies around the country that will make meat patties for McDonald's to the McDonald's spec. Same thing goes with our chicken products. Same thing goes with everything that we sell, right down to the paper napkins.
And that's the privilege of being a franchisee.
That's correct.
That's why you've purchased this franchise.
That's right. And much of, as I said earlier, there's a service fee that's involved, and that's a percentage of sales also. And part of those funds go to, if you will, paying the salary of these agents that go out there in behalf of us and negotiate with the different suppliers. For example, if I chose to open Bill's hamburger stand, I don't think I'd get a very good deal by going to Heinz Ketchup, for example, and saying, hey, I'm Bill's hamburger stand and I need some ketchup to run my business. Mm-hmm. What kind of price can you give me? Where you get an agent from McDonald's, a purchasing agent from McDonald's, to come to the same ketchup company and say, I'm buying ketchup for 14,000 restaurants in the U.S., what kind of a price can you give me?
So that's a benefit.
That's
you have
a huge benefit.
Quote-unquote invisible partner, really.
Huge benefit, mm-hmm. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. They can negotiate from the power of strength because of the volumes that we do as a system, not because of my individual restaurants, mm-hmm. but because I'm part of an overall bigger system.
Mm-hmm. And did that, again, was that the reason why you decided to pursue that as opposed to your own, those other business ideas that were outside of a franchise system?
Well, I guess the easy answer to that is yes, mm-hmm. but it's a little more complicated than that. Mm-hmm. Again, you're purchasing a known system that's working, mm-hmm. and it's been working very well
for years.
in different parts of the country, and mm-hmm. for at that time was about 17 years, I guess, and so. There is, although there are no guarantees that your particular restaurant is going to be successful, the odds are certainly in your favor. Now, as I said earlier, in my particular case, we missed the boat. I mean, it was a very difficult early few years, really. And it took us about 3 years to get to the break-even point. And then we started getting on the plus side of the ledger. So there was a lot of what they would term sweat equity went into that business, I'll tell you.
Yes.
Okay.
And how many locations do you currently operate?
I have 10 different restaurants now. We have 3 here in Twin Falls, mm-hmm. and I have 2 in Mountain Home, which is about 90 miles to the northwest of us. And then we have single restaurants in Burley, in Jerome, in Haley, in Gooding, and in Buell.
So you started in one location, all in the Magic Valley, mm-hmm. and just started multiplying outward. Do you employ other family businesses? Are there other family-owned franchises in the system?
Oh, there are many, many family-owned franchises or owned by families within the system. As a matter of fact, most of them are. But I don't employ those people. Mm-hmm. I mean, I employ families certainly, but I guess maybe I don't understand the question quite well. But McDonald's is basically made up of a lot of folks just like me. Today, approximately 87%. And I said earlier, there's about 14,600 McDonald's restaurants in the USA today, and about 87% of those are owned by individuals like us. And when I say us, I'm talking about Donna and I and my two sons. My two sons are in the business with me, and that's part of what this is all about, family business.
That's right.
And they are stockholders of our family corporation. And so, but around the country, we have many similar scenarios, and scenarios where there are much larger operators. For example, the operators in Boise, friends of ours, the Darmodys, Dick and his son and his daughter are actually have their own family corporation there, and they have about, I'm not sure, 27 McDonald's, something like that, in the Treasure Valley altogether in the Boise area. And there are many of those kinds of stories all around the country.
So family business is possible and is happening. Is that what you're saying?
It's definitely happening. Not only possible, but it is real and happening, yes, throughout the system.
Well, I would love to explore more of that with you. We're going to take a brief break, and I've got some more questions. I'm so honored that you're here talking to us about that and giving families across the nation and in Twin Falls encouragement in this area.
My pleasure. Glad to be here.
A ranger station.
I'd like to report a bear hug.
Okay.
I put out my campfire and Smokey Bear hugged me.
So you drowned the fire, you stirred it, drowned it again, and felt that it was cold?
Uh-huh.
Yep, he's just letting you know you did good.
Bear hug from Smokey Bear. Status update.
I'm gonna let you go now. There are many ways to start a fire, but one sure way to put it out. Learn how you can do your part at SmokeyBear.com.
Sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service, Ad Council, and your state forester. Well, I finally did it. I opened a 401k.
What? Why? Just wait for the inheritance. We've definitely got a rich uncle somewhere. We're one call away from the winner's circle at the Derby, dinners with multiple forks, a vacation home in the country, using summer as a verb.
You don't actually think that, do you?
When it comes to financial stability, don't get left behind. Get tools and tips for saving at feedthepig.org. This message brought to you by the American Institute of CPAs and the Ad Council.
You wanted to be a teacher when you were little, but as you grew up, things changed. Teaching just didn't seem like the best option anymore, so you decided to become something else. But what would your 12-year-old self say? Interesting and innovative things are happening in teaching today, so it's time to put it back on your list. Don't try to convince yourself otherwise. You had it right the first time.
Find out how you can make more at teach.org. Make more. Teach. Brought to you by Teach and the Ad Council.
Ranger station.
Yeah, hi. I'd like to report a bear sighting in the forest. 1 second, I'm having a smoke. Next thing I know, I'm face-to-face with Smokey Bear. Wow. And he told me it only takes one spark to start a wildfire.
Did you know 9 out of 10 wildfires are caused by humans?
I had no idea.
That's why Smokey's famous and you're not. If you see someone in danger of starting a wildfire, step in and make a difference. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council. Learn more at SmokeyBear.com.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
You're back listening to Family Business with Daphne. Don't forget to check this out on YouTube. My YouTube channel is Family Business. I also write a blog, daphnemallory.blogspot.com. I write on this topic for Entrepreneur Magazine, and I cannot wait to profile this there as well. I just think it's an amazing story. I still cannot get over the 50-year anniversary. That's absolutely amazing in all of this. And so I want to explore that a little bit more. You can't talk about family business without dealing with the issue of family life.
The family. Right.